There we go. Hello, YouTube. We are live streaming some weekly personal work in process stuff. I'm going to go over to there we go. Congratulations, America. That was reasonably sensible. Unfortunate that there were so many still, but you know what? With all the gerrymandering and vote purges and all that, I wouldn't jump to any conclusions yet. We went on a nice walk today. Ooh, that's interesting. So, what's going on with this? I don't like this new interface. I meant to do that before I hit stream. Sorry about that. So it goes. Went for a lovely walk and took a couple of neat pictures. I believe. Can I find them here? What have you all been doing this week? On a personal level, just with my own work. Forget I'll use. Pretty slammed. Slowed me way down. Or I should say, today, when I woke up, I was going slow. Because the week was intense. Kind of making up for shortfalls in a previous, earlier episode schedule. Just had to put in double time. Do a lot of designs. I like that. So, got a good long night's sleep, went to bed early. Because that's my idea of fun at 50. And then, said, hey, let's go. It's too bad we can't. She said, it's too bad we can't go get breakfast. And I said, well, we could probably go get takeout. So we went to on a walk to go get takeout breakfast, which was lovely. We ate it in the park, and it was a perfect autumn day. And I saw some shoes with a leaf in them. Like the leaf was decided it was a good idea to go for a walk. I don't know. That's what I thought anyway. Whoops, wrong button. I'm on the wrong thingy. There we go. Get out, go for a walk. You know, be careful. Do not like the idea of going and sitting inside somewhere, which isn't really an option right now anyway. But sitting in a park wasn't too bad. Using the public bathroom, I think, was the most kind of it. But we did it. I have a bottle of alcohol spray, a spray bottle. So just zap the seat with that and let it sit for a sec. Give it a good wipe down. Nothing's guaranteed, but it seems sufficient caution to be taken. Sufficient cautions should always be taken. It's just a thing. It's just a rule. That's why they're sufficient. It's definitional. I had I suspect an exchange with a troll, which would mean that their social media strategy will be probably to evolve with the changing U.S. political climate, which doesn't change that radically. I wouldn't overstate what just happened, but it's a turn for the more sensible. Well done. So I was zooming out there to take a look to see globally what felt like the right place. When I've talked in the past about aphantasia, not literally seeing anything in my mind when I draw. Having an idea, like in this case, the memory that I have. First of all, I have to acknowledge it's the story I've told myself, and that's the memory you have. It's the story you hold and tell yourself in memory. I don't believe in the idea of false memories. I think people can lose them in the sense that they forget the story. If you have enough of the sense record around still for an experience, it can be retrieved, I think. But like, that's an interesting concept, because that's what happens. We reconstruct memory from the record we have, and for a lot of people that's primarily a sense memory, which is I think why it blows some people's minds so much that there are people who are, I think it's a bad euphemism to call us like a blind mind's eye. That gives it like the wrong impression. My favorite thing that I may have already said is that you don't need to visualize to conceive of things, and that one of my favorite ironies that is a truism that people don't, I think most people don't have the idea behind it, don't have a lot of familiarity with, which is sorry, I'm remembering phrasing, and sometimes that takes me a minute. I'm having a problem with words right now, which I'll have to come back to because I'm drawing. This is how it goes sometimes. So I don't know if you see, I've got first sitting, second sitting are my layer names. First sitting, second sitting. Because I'm trying out different systems always when I work on pretty much every comic story I do to some small degree, in that I'm always experimenting with some idea or another. And in this particular case, there are things I'm trying to do to make in the moment process very spontaneous, and capture, I don't know, it's hard to describe, like the sketchiness of memory. I don't know. It's feeling like a very, I've used that before, but it seems like a very inadequate analogy for what I mean. I think, though, a lot of it is a tactile sense of memory, in a sense, like what things feel like when I'm trying to draw situations. There's the textural and the emotional notions of feeling that I do lean on for recreating pantomime and lighting and setting and things like that, and like what do those moments feel like. But it isn't like I can literally like reach out and feel the space or something like that. But there is a sort of conceptual thing of reaching out with the eye and feeling the space and being able to kind of carve it and shape it. And that can be simple things from the structure of the line, the gesture, but also the shading and defining form and seeing light and shadow. Gets even more into that. And I know I want to kind of play with an ambiguous effect on this. I was talking this week in class about, so when you contour shading like I was just doing on the drawing of myself in the car seat, it creates a lot of more form. It's sort of like the lines are laying on the topology of the figure, and the density and directionality help convey form and depth. And so it's a really effective technique. But it doesn't mean that you can't do, so in this case I'm going to do essentially flat. Like I'm not going to try to curve the lines or make them trace the form. I'm just trying to create a silhouette, but then use light and dark to pull out some of the form. And intentionally make it kind of like foggy, gauzy. Nope, don't fall into it. I think just want to start doing shape, but that's explicitly what I'm trying to avoid. Down here would be probably denser. I'm noticing one of the biases that's consistent with my favorite tools in Clip Studio is that the feathering tail I can get is not as symmetrical as the one I can do with a real pencil or brush. There's always a one end that's thinner and one end that's heavier for most of the strokes. So a good blending tool is to rotate occasionally, make sure these heavy moments spread out and aren't too concentrated. These check marks, I call them in classes, they're an indication that you exceeded your speed on the, see, that's the thick line I was avoiding, these end of strokes. I have to be careful to taper them more. There we go. They blend better and they're more tapered. And it doesn't matter that I go over boundaries, but I want to be aware of crossing into the seat area where I'm going to make it a lot darker. And I'm going to do cross hatching too. I'm doing, this is a collective, oops, nope, I don't want to cross hatch yet, and not at an angle. Just what to say. This is a first pass. And I'm doing sort of like all of one direction of the whole thing in the first pass. That got a little curved in there, but I'm going to leave it. Just go for more density. Start building that a little bit. Yeah, I kind of want to like a bridge there, even though there's a bit of almost a gap between his hairline and the window frame. So similar to a technique that you see Crumb doing a lot, but he usually builds his out of short strokes, so he does patches. And it gives that rumply texture to the tonal fields that he can create with that when he does these patches. Which is one of the aesthetic notes of his line and use of shading. It's really like deceptively effective. But you have cats fighting in the studio. So we have a kitten, who's not such a small kitten anymore, who's haranguing our older cat to play. And Oscar plays, but also gets irate. So here, let's zoom out. Yeah. It's going to be interesting, I think. Trying to think of like my major cross-hatching influences. So definitely Jack Davis was one of them. Also Sienkiewicz and who else did I look at a lot? I did a lot of cool cross-hatching technique. I wasn't going to do that, but I like that little bit of inflection. I'm just trying to build up some variations. And the layers. Just going to get the really dark on this side. Angela's scolding the other. Just cool it. More efficient. It's going to be hidden in there, so I'm doing some scribble sketching to fill in, and I'll still do the edges as strokes so that it blends in and masks well. And I want to make sure nice, doesn't be perfect, but we want to break that up. There we go. Yeah. I think I want to just do one direction line for that. I might bring in the cross hatching further down. That might be a better effect. More interesting transitional. Yeah. I guess like one of the distinctive traits, perhaps, probably not unique to, but partially driven by the fact that I am aphantasic, is that I don't have a process where I build something a lot in my head before I put it to paper. I think about things, and there are things that I've spent a lot of time on thinking about. Like Dream Life was a story that I spent a great deal of time thinking about before I actually started drawing anything. And that was good because it was a learning project. It wasn't actually expected to do it in the end. It was a hobby horse script. It started as something I wanted to do, but that project got kind of abandoned by the original collaborator, and so I kind of considered it a dead horse, and I could then just go, okay, well, what if, and play with it. And I kept playing with it. And then I got to where I was like, yeah, okay, this is an interesting, different thing I've done now. And I want to do something with it. I took someone else sort of saying, someone whose writing opinion I trusted. Kind of saying, yeah, you should do this at the school. And then so I started drawing it. Did a lot of thumbnails and roughs. And labored over it a great deal when I got the grant money to do the work. A little too slow. Sophomore problems. It wasn't my first book, but it was my first, like, no one else is here, it's all on you. But I got it done. Mostly. And I'm doing a book 2 now because I had considerably more story than I had time to do book with. Dream Life Book 1 is a book 1 for reals, because there's a book 2, but I had to get back to real life. Paid to them bills and things. That was a rough one too. That was basically going into 2008 after that, and things did not go well in 2008. I had to wash dishes for a while. No shit. You do what you gotta do. That's what I did when I was younger. And then ever since then I've been freelance. I mean, I can't really complain in that sense. Freelance, or like what I'm doing now, staff at animation studio. But it was like, what is it, 8 months? I think it was 8 months. A spring, summer, and fall. Or was it a winter too? Might have been a little longer, closer to a year. I can't remember exactly right now. Dame Tartine. Breakfast joint. Breakfast dish pits. I mean, I have a high tolerance. I wasn't that bothered, but some people really can't. They're pretty gross. There's no question. People are just, dude, clean your plate up a bit more before the service comes, or just don't abandon it. It's such a fucking war zone. Ugh. We were not tipped out. Any place I ever worked at, which I have to say, injustice. Dish crew puts up with the worst shit. Think. Nope. Wrong setting. What am I on? Applying only. Oh, right. Okay. So I know what I have to do. I want. Oh, there we are. Yeah. That doesn't work. Yeah. So then I think I might actually, yeah, that might be interesting. We'll see. Not quite, but almost. Also want to maybe select. Expand selection, just like 1 pixel. Yeah, it's a bit better. Let me just see. Hey, Dwight. And wow. Don't know what to say, Joanna. That's not really something I'm equipped to do much about. I don't even know where here is. Oops. I think, let's try, yeah. So now, okay. I don't know if this is the thing that I forgot mid thought I was talking about before, but one of the things I was talking about was the whole like visualizing versus not visualizing, but still being able to conceive of things. And where I was going with that was that works for getting ideas about what to do. I think I ultimately think a little bit about which path to take. I'll usually experiment with thumbnails when I'm talking about page layouts. And when it comes to rendering like this, it's very much an exploratory process. And it's always been about try something. I think digital makes me a little more bold because there's less work to do to undo things, but I also used to just experiment, but like keep the experiments somewhat bound and limited at first. And that's kind of what I'm doing right now with the masking too. I'm testing out with the arm now exactly how I'm going to use my basket weave hatching. This is a blended basket weave but I'm doing patches. So it is essentially a basket weave. Yeah. The rest of it's going to be more organic edged. To lend to the blurry impression. You can see again, you can just make out some of my rushed patterns in the color.
Is it?
Yeah, what? Is what?
Quesadilla?
Quesadilla? Oh.
Wait.
Can you prep them but don't make them? Cool. I'll go make quesadillas when I'm finished drawing. Yummy. third directional to the edge of the headrest, which I'll also be using on the side of the chair. So when you're not doing hatching that's trying to contour the forms, again, that's more like you see here, where the lines fall in line with the topological contours of the form. When we're using density instead, the changing the plane of direction for the line, introducing a change in plane, can still help communicate the change in plane of the surface. Even if it's not actually in line with it. So it can be technically inconsistent. I'm actually using one that's relatively consistent. It's actually like the line. This is the direction that light would be coming in the window. So it's that's one of a number of ways people use hatching to communicate multiple ideas usually. Good cross hatching isn't just sort of arbitrary. It's not just there because it's doing one of a number of jobs in the art to communicate light, shadow, texture, plane changes or contours in form, and I think I'm missing something. Thinking about it for a second. So light, dark, contours and form. That's plane changes, by the way. I was just saying it different ways. Planes being flat things and contours being curvilinear. There's something else that I feel like I'm leaving out of my list that you can do with hatching. Texture, did that, said that. Yes. Good. And I'm going to do horizontals that pretty much ignore that the edge of the seat is there to help it blend in. And I'll guarantee that I won't have gaps and spaces created by all these moments where, as much as I try, I might fall short of some sort of perfect edged line. I'm not going to even try, because in this case the idea is the sketchiness of memory. Oh, bullet full circle. I need to get like a little gif of those kids going. Yeah. I can flash that up on the screen. Yeah. One of the most common pieces of information, notes, advice, suggestions that I ever end up giving to students is do more. So there's a bias because as you can see, I like drawing with a lot of rendering. Not always necessarily detail, but it's always information. I'm aware of the crayons. I don't want a crayon for this. I might use it for something else. Like this particular comic will involve a lot of different things. But I'm using what is a good approximation of my technical pencil. It's actually a brush, but I did work in this story previously. I've mentioned in other videos. It was all done in technical pencil and ink and ink wash. And so those are the tools I'm using the most often on these first digital pages, because they're actually going to fall into the same section of story and have to kind of blend in and get along with those pages. We'll see what else I will try. There will be other things. But for now, I'm doing this thing. Yeah. I'm going to make a slightly heavier line as I move into this area. And I want to keep, I'm going to blend this by adding the same new angle that's exclusive for the back of the seat. And there's a pattern to my madness in this hatching strategy. You notice that here I'm going this way. So I'll use color for a second to show you. These lines go this way. These lines go this way. This is an edge. So having the plane change like that, even in a, like, it doesn't go down more like that, the way rationally it would if it was following contours. We're not doing that. In fact, we're kind of going against the contour, logical contour in a way. But that I'm getting the win is that I get this up feather gradient at the end here also, which helps with my lighting. I need to shift. I'm trying out my old kneeling chair. It's something that actually kind of by design gets me moving around a bit more, because you can't just kneel on it for too long, your knees get sore. Now I'm going to go the other way. Has it been there for a while? It's been there for a while. That's okay. Just be a little surgical. Good enough. And now I'm going to get into this corner. And of course the same V-shaped change of angle along this contour. Not masked because I do want it to be fuzzier, but still use it to both increase my density and the value as a result of this area where I want the murkiness. I may even add yet another line direction. There we go. Move it to my arms best. One of the tricks to doing a lot of this kind of hatching is not to do it with the fingers. By that I mean I'm not actually moving my fingers at all. They're just holding the stylus. All this movement is primarily my elbow. And I'm having to remind myself not to tense my shoulder because that's not the point. But my elbow is moving the most. If I use this is more, now my shoulder can move more, so I'm going to do that for a bit to change it up so I don't get carpal tunnel. That is definitely a real concern. Don't do that to yourself. I'm fidgety, so I think that helps me. I will have to stretch at some point. It's not quite like a level of compulsion that I hear described for Tourette's, but definitely can understand how I could get that much. Occasionally, the need to flex a muscle and move my body gets pretty overwhelming. Also happens a lot to me when I'm like trying to relax. When I lay down to go to bed, it's like everything's shifting from holding me upright to lying down. And I have all these feelings of settling and needing to stretch and flex and lengthen my ligaments and pop my joints. There we go. I think I'm going to put in this direction too. From back here. So yeah, I have a theory in my head, an idea about how I want to do a thing. I can conceive of it. But execution is application. And by always remaining kind of improvisational a little bit, I have this idea about something I want to accomplish, but not, there's no image held in my head as up as an ideal version of it yet. There's no noise about what it could be based on some imagination I have that's visual, which I don't, and what I'll execute. So I'm often, I think, happier than others with the outcome because I'm happy. So anything happened. That worked. How about that? And when I'm wrong, that just means I get to experiment and figure out how to make something work. It's not a particularly negative experience for me. Knock it back a bit more. And there needs a bit more. now I'm starting to get hungry. I'm gonna have to go eat that food. It was good. I was waiting swiftly until I had an appetite. I try not to eat when I'm not actually hungry. That is not good for me. I think the first pass should be masked, and then the second pass will be free for all. So a masking trick that I use on paper to do the same thing, and what I'm just transposing the same experience and ideas about technique, but it takes slightly different tools on each platform. Here, the lasso tool is your quickest way to accomplish the same goals. On paper, I usually use post-it notes or just pieces of paper I'm holding with my hand for a simple straight line. And I can often build a lot of shapes out of a straight line ultimately, so frequently that works too. But I can put down post-it notes and make a compound curve or cut shapes into them. Excuse me. I don't do the cutting shapes into them that often, but it's a nice little hack when you want to do something a little more delicate. And then you post it down and you draw over it onto the new surface. Usually, rather than into it, because if you draw into it, you're going to get some the lead's eventually going to probably even break, but it's going to bang into the paper and create dents, and it's less effective, less efficient. Like some ill-conceived knuckles there, because again, I'm looking for the weird rubbery nature of memory. My experience of it anyway. And it's my story, so I'll tell it how I like it. Yeah. Let's do a couple of fun for big ones. For a sec. Here. Rendering's a broader term. It includes line work. So it's not really a versus. I suggest I want to go back to, was it dot? Something like that. Yes. Close enough. So in this part, I'm doing the roof, but also sort of intentionally trying to blend a bit with what's going on outside the window. And I can just delete here. I'll do the contours of the space on the other layer. So the first sitting and second sitting is about kind of like a less structured but still structural process. So it's not like I am now doing pencils. I am now doing inks. I'm just doing the drawing with the bastard's tail, and it's free to evolve, but I keep it in passes and even broken out even more flexibly, I think, because that lets me experiment and play with the texture of memory more freely. Let's see how much of that stays exactly as is. Dwight asked in the chat about line versus, what was the exact wording yet? Rendering versus line work. And as a thought relates to that after replying a moment ago, sort of. That's what I was talking about. A philosophy of like how you think about the work instead of like I said, sort of a more procedural, classic comic industry and illustration technique. You have rough thumbnails, you do cleanups of some kind, pencils in comics, and then you finish it. Often in comics we call it inks. But it actually does not have to be done with ink anymore. In fact, I'm using pixels currently. Actual inking is a byproduct of industrial printing and the reproduction process. Yeah, I moved the edge. That's what happened there. Okay, nope. Inking is driven by like the way it's basically influenced by etching, and traditions created by that. But people hatched before etching, but really ordered, structured etching to create values and tones with black or white, like no real color in the printing process. You would use line work, woodblock printing, and then later in etching of various kinds, lines that suggested value. Going to be black in there, so let's connect that. Make sure all these are closed. Put a thicker line on this so I can just select away. Sapieri, I think I'm saying his name right. Did was it Daruna? And some great other comics. But I saw his heavy metal stuff with Daruna. Definitely not age appropriate when I saw it. And I was just blown away by his hatching technique. It's very simple too. He basically has one pattern that dominates, variants of it dominate everything he's doing. Which is impressive. And I think in theory you could do that with almost any. It's not the pattern he picked that's the secret or something. It's the nuance he can get with his range of patterns that he creates derives from the core pattern. So they all follow the same basic rule, but are variants in other ways. And that simplicity gives his work a strong stylistic coherency, which isn't like mandatory, but it's definitely like I like trying out different things and having literally different styles at times. But that's not for everybody. That is a personal preference thing. I think you're less penalized for it these days than you used to be. There used to be a strong bias against it, industry-wise, in comics and in illustration in general. These days, I feel like the younger generation of editors and art directors are less attached to sort of this notion that somehow if an artist didn't have a very specifically obvious style, that they were hard to hire and quantify. Because you can always ask the person to show you what you're going to do, and if you're doing work that's like a freelance gig, you can maintain a certain amount of authorship if you want it, but ultimately you're being hired to be a pair of hands for somebody else. So in those jobs, I'm not concerned about what I would do. I have to figure out what they would like me to do. All the design work I'm doing for animation right now, it's not in the style of drawing you're seeing right now, that's for sure. It's not a complaint, it's just very different. And that flexibility frees me up to take a lot more opportunities to make a living. I recently saw a tweet that I would have to nod firmly agreement to. It was very funny. I forget who said it. Let me see if I can remember now. The gist of it was, it's ridiculous to accuse illustrators of trying to sell out. What the fuck do you think we're trying to do here? Let's make a living. I think the only time you could even come close to accusing anyone of that coherently would be if they'd somehow made a personal, that individual, not a class of people, but an individual had made some sort of overt statement about intent to, I guess in this case, not be commercial. And for those who do this from the position of like putting fine art on a pedestal, well, I mean, sorry, but are you not aware that people are trying to sell their fine art? That's a thing, you know. That's how people. I mean, even if they're doing it in the terms of like grants and I don't know, like other fine art institutions for funding, you're selling it to somebody. Them. I say this as someone, I don't, you know, this is not to besmirch any grant program. I've been a judge. I was the judge for the Canada Council of the Arts for the graphic novel grant. This was after receiving it a couple times, which I believe I mentioned earlier tonight. Much to my good fortune. That was a real privilege. And I'm not sure if I'll do it again. I might. For the right project. And right now I'm paying a lot of taxes, so I feel like I've earned up my credit. At the time I wasn't actually making very much, and so not putting into the system very much, so I got quite a few grants for the number of times I applied, and I just felt like it was time to take a bit of a break, let somebody else get in there. Not that I couldn't, but I didn't have a project that I was focused enough that felt like a good fit for the grant program. Now I have a few that would be a good fit, but my current strategy for doing them is to sort of juggle between them, so I wouldn't really be able to pitch one book. And again, I feel like I need to find other ways to fund things than always relying on the lottery, the grant, which, you know, I got a lot, but I got 3 times out of 7 applications, I think it was. That's a great hit rate, but it's not like a sure thing still. And that's something I could always just count on being there to make the thing happen. So I did Patreon. Not that it's like turning into a thing I can count on to make things happen, but the idea was that maybe as a kind of like subscription model, I could build an audience that way and make it work somehow. Okay, I'm gonna call it a session for a bit in a minute because my stomach is beginning to make noises. That's a good sign. It's time to eat. And I would like to stretch my legs. Always remember to stay flexible and limber when you're drawing. I used to spend 3-4 hours in the chair without noticing the time go by. I'm capable of doing that. Arguably, potentially even somewhat prone. Not to the point that some folks I've heard describe are, but enough so that I need to be mindful to move. I found a way to put the tablet up higher on the easel and use this rig as a standing desk, potentially, which I will try next week. One byproduct of the long hours, which was the biggest, when I tell you this week kicked my ass, that was the biggest issue. Just really long hours. I've been trying to not work overtime so much, but the work is demanding it. So they seem fine about paying, but I'm always surprised by, things that I think are going to go fast. I'm not always wrong with that, but a number of times that I've thought, oh yeah, this will be a quick one, and then 3 hours later, shit, well that wasn't. And then I did was it Thursday? I taught a cartooning class and drew, what was it, 13 prompts? 3 complicated ones in the morning, and then after my class, 10 that were a mix of some more complicated and some real nice and simple. And then Friday I just did piles of revisions. Just normal. A lot of them weren't really that serious, but that partially why I could plow through a whole bunch of them. And then less new stuff that I thought I could pull off. I don't know. I got up to get a cup of coffee. That took 10 minutes, but I don't think it really accounted for the difference. And I don't know. I am surprised at times, I am saying, basically. By my occasionally inaccurate estimates about how long things will take. For those who've been around a while, this is nothing new. This is not news. It is not a revelation. Yeah. I think I want to do that a little right here. That's what I'm going for. Well, I think that's it. What did it just do? Oh, it's over an hour. Goodness. Okay then. Well, once more, congratulations, America, for making a moderately sensible decision. See you on the other side. I go eat quesadillas now. Stay safe. Wear your mask.